What is up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com for another edition of the UNC Football Show. I'm Jacob Turner. Joining me, as he always does, it's our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. And AJ, we're here for the Pitt preview edition of the Football Show. Obviously, the Panthers coming to Chapel Hill this Saturday, sitting at 4-0, coming off a bye week as well. Carolina sitting at 3-2, 1-0 in 0-1 in ACC. Play noon kick, ESPN2. Pitt currently a 3-point favorite, over under set at 63.5. AJ, so good, entertaining matchup coming up this weekend. I think Pitt's a good football team. We'll talk about them a little bit later on in the show, but definitely a challenge, and arguably probably the biggest challenge that Carolina's faced this year. Because again, I think Pitt's a pretty good team so far, and they got a lot of things to like about them, especially on that offensive side of the ball. But make sure y'all stay tuned for that, because we'll dive in to Pittsburgh a lot more later on in the show. But AJ, I want to start with the press conference on Monday, and because this is going to feed into a lot of the conversation that we're going to have before we go into the preview edition of the podcast. And I think we spent some time on the podcast, the Duke preview pod, coming off the JMU game, talked a little bit about Mack's, his Monday presser after that JMU loss, and how it was different than I think any Mack presser we've seen in his 2.0 era. Looked a little bit it looked like the JMU loss was still kind of weighing on him and the program pretty heavily. You could kind of see it in his demeanor and what he was saying and how he was going about answering questions. And I thought Monday's press conference, coming off that tough loss at Duke, in which Carolina was just abysmal in the second half on both sides of the ball, I thought we saw a 180-degree flip of, okay, this is a more defiant Mack. This is a Mack Brown that I've seen over the last 5 years. This is the more of the Mack Brown I'm used to of, hey, guys, I think the main message, and correct me if I'm wrong because you were there, well, the main thing I took away from it was, look, I can handle the criticism. You put out a piece on Wednesday morning about this. I can handle the criticism. I've been doing this for 40 years. I can handle it. If you want to blame anybody, blame me. Don't blame the players. Kind of taking all the negativity that is kind of swelling up around the program right now and saying, direct it towards me. I'm built for it. I can handle it. And, this season's not over yet. And again, I thought that was just a complete flip from what we saw after the JMU game. So again, what were your thoughts of being in that press conference on Monday as someone who was, 2 feet from Mack during that presser? What did you make of that? Because that was the immediate thing that jumped out of me. I didn't necessarily expect that going into this week's press conference because of what we saw after the JMU game, but it was just a completely different mood.
I don't think he came downstairs, and I should set the scene. We're in the lobby of the Keenan Football Center, which is where we do the press conferences, and Mack always comes down the elevator by the weight room, and then he comes out, and usually comes out, 5, 8 minutes, 10 minutes before the presser's supposed to start. He'll stand over there. Used to drink Snapple, now he's drinking water. And sometimes we chat and have fun, and he'll make a little dig at somebody, all in fun, and we'll cut up a little bit. Okay. I thought he was really relaxed and in a good mood. There were some jokes going on about some stuff, and it's always very casual conversation. A lot of coaches don't do that. He does it because I've said for a long time, it's very human. A lot of coaches aren't very human. They're almost machines and robotic. He's not that way. And as a journalist, it's fun to cover a guy like that just simply because it's different. So the press conference begins, and he goes through his stuff, and he's clearly puts on his coaching hat when he's in the press conference and representing the program hat. And there are plenty of things that should be bothering him, that should have him a little bit edgy right now. So that's the case. But then we start asking questions. And a lot of the questions were about the frustration when things go off the rails defensively. How did that happen? Defense went bad, offense went bad at the same time. Communicating to players. How do you right the ship when it's going wrong? That was the tenor of the discussion that originated from the questions a bunch of us in the media asked, and his responses led us to ask more questions. So we see what's going on, so we're going to ask those questions. He is going to respond accordingly, and the questions are about things that have him banging his fist in his office, I'm sure, pounding the table. So I think it's a combination of those things. And yeah, I don't think he's happy. You can't do what they've done the last 2 weeks and be happy at all. I think there's perspective, but as far as, hey, look what happened in North Carolina, and this is just football. I get it. But when you're in that building, football is the most important thing because that's what you're there for. So most important thing at that time is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's more important than what happened over there. I think people probably understand what I'm saying here. So I get it. And he did take a lot of errors, and he's not going to throw his kids under the bus. He's never going to do that. He never has, never will. And he said, look, I'm okay with it. If you guys are upset, the fans are passionate and angry. I want them to be angry because he wants them to care. If they're angry, they care. Mm-hmm. And he said, I'm mad. I'm mad at myself because I'm angry at myself because I'm not doing the job I should be doing. So I think people sometimes on Twitter lately, the last couple of days, and even on our board Mack's not being accountable. I think he is being accountable. He's just not saying some of the things to the degree of bitterness that the fans want to hear because that's how they feel. And they express bitterness because they got nothing to lose. They got no skin in the game in that sense. He does, and we do in the media, and we're not bitter and passionate because we don't have a dog in the fight, so to speak. We're there to cover the team, and that's why you have the impartial arbiters, if you will, or in-betweens like what we are from the team and the fan base, because you have to have that. If we approached Mack, if we were to take the 10 angriest people on Twitter and put it and replace us with them in the press conference, A, I doubt they would ask the questions the way that they say things on Twitter. B, if they did, they're not going to get responses. That's not going to get you anywhere. There's a way to bring this stuff up. There's a way as journalists to articulate the things that aren't going well, to ask about that. Those are obvious criticisms because we're pointing out things that aren't going well, but there's a way to do it where you get an actual response from the coach. And I think in all of us doing that in the press conference on Monday, what we got was this. Mack's upset. He's upset at himself. He's upset at his team, but he's going to take it on himself in front of us behind the scenes. You know, they're hammering each individual kid making the many mistakes that they are. When you have 19 hurries allowed by the offense and you have 20 missed tackles on the defense, there was no shortage of criticism that went on Sunday in the film room, and probably hammering that home as we speak, every day this week leading up to the Pitt game. But I do think that Mack has perspective about how he's perceived and the program's perceived. More than other coaches, he tends to have a better handle on what's being said about what they're doing. And I think he gets a little edgy about it because, and I know I'm going long here, but I want to say this. He knows that in 2017, 2018, Carolina fans are out there saying, I just want to win 8 games and beat State every once in a while. Well, that's what he's done. Lost 3 in a row, State, but he beat them the first 2 times, and they've been in position to win the last 3 or 2 of the last 3. Not last year, but 2 of the last 3. And that's what they've done. I mean, they're 3-2, and people are acting like they're 0-5. And I think that concerns him some because look at the program since he left and look at it when he came back. People are going to talk about Butch. Butch cheated his ass off, period. I know that people don't want to hear that. Some people think it was wrong getting rid of him. You got to have a full review. Yeah, Butch was trying to make Carolina football but he never won more than 8 games.
The same record 3 years in a row.
He was raking it. He was bringing in big-time recruits and doing it not above board and still didn't win more than 8 games. I direct you to the South Carolina game at home with the criticism he got for his coaching decisions and clock management from that game. So my point is Mack knows this stuff. He's uber aware. His wife is uber aware. Sally, he'll say, Sally tells me what everybody's saying. And I think she does. And that's okay. I don't mind a coach that's honest about the fans. I've dealt with a lot of coaches say, we don't hear what they're saying. We don't know.
Yes.
When they do, because every once in a while they'll give a dig when they're doing well. Y'all didn't think we were going to be this good. Wait a minute. I didn't think you paid attention to us or paid attention to the fans. So I think there's a lot going on. I think it's an interesting topic. I think it's an evolving topic right now because we don't know what's going to happen Saturday and how he's going to respond to that. I don't know what's going to happen at the end of this year. But I do think the conversation has intensified about what will happen or what people think should happen. And that's why it's gotten to a very personal level with a lot of people. And Mack is a human being, and he's going to react to it. He's always aware of what people say. And I think he's a little annoyed that people have gone so far into the realm of criticism when, guys, Orange Bowl, 9 wins, ACC championship game appearance, 8 wins, big-time quarterbacks. Okay, we haven't completed the deal, but, man, we keep knocking the door and we're getting further and further into it. That's the way he sees it. And he doesn't understand why a fan base that had Torbush, Bunning, Davis, 1 year of Withers, and then Fedora, who had one really good year, why they don't understand and appreciate what he thinks he's done, which is more for the program than the other ones did. So I get it. And I will also say that when things reach the point where it is right now, it often doesn't change. There are a lot of people I go back to Herb Sendek. I covered that a lot. I covered that coaching search after he left. I covered the whole league back then. I covered state basketball a lot. And Herb was winning. He was doing a pretty good job. He had made a lot of mistakes early, figured it out, and was winning. And people had made up their minds. They wanted him gone. They were not going to change. And once they made those minds up, and they were publicly saying, gotta go, they didn't want to bend. So I think we're getting in that area right now with Mack with some people. And I'm saying some people, I'm talking about the public. I'm not talking about the university. That's a different story. Yeah. Those are very different conversations that I've had. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And I agree with you in a lot of ways. And I think Mack does get frustrated with the fan base quite often and the criticisms he receives. And it's not me making that up. He expresses it in press conferences. I mean, it's not me just assuming he does. I mean, it's evident. Go listen to some of his press conferences, and I get it. I mean, he's a Hall of Famer. He's a fiery guy. I mean, there's a reason he's a Hall of Famer. I mean, he has to have that passion and that energy and that, belief in himself and what he's doing, and that defiance of backing himself to even get to that level, even get close to that level. So I get that. I think I look at it in two ways too, because I think for me, there's different sections of the fan base. And right now I'll split it into two. There's a fan base perspective that is negative. Carolina could be up 42-0. And there is certain members of the fan base that are going to focus on how Carolina only has 2 sacks and they should have 5. And they're not going to tweet about all the good stuff going on. It's going to be that right there. But I think there's a bigger majority of the fan base, especially now, especially in year, with year 6 that Mack's in, that look at it in a different perspective and say, okay, unacceptable loss to JMU. You're up 17 at the half at Duke, your rival team you've undefeated with under Mack Brown 2.0. You're complete control of the game, and then you end up losing 21-20 in the fashion that Carolina did. But I think the criticism that portion of the fan base has that maybe doesn't get as focused on by someone like Mack is, why are we, and this is not news to anybody, AJ. We've spent many a podcast talking about these things the last 5 years. Why is it that the same problems are kind of rearing their head every time? Special teams, never very good, always a problem. Most of the time, always doing something to actively hurt the team. Why has that not been fixed? Defense. Why is it when the wheels fall off on the defense, man, they fall off and there's no putting the wheels back on? You can't, it's not like NASCAR, AJ, where you can pull off and pull off in the pit crew and they'll put the wheels back on, they'll get it going again, they'll get back on the track and everything's good to go. When them wheels are off, man,
there's a column right there. UNC football needs a pit crew.
They do, man.
You're making great points. Go ahead.
There's no pit crew there to fix it. Why is that a continued theme? Why can't that be fixed? Line of scrimmage. Again, I thought we'd seen some better things from the O-line at times this year and the defensive line as well. But then you go back and watch that second half of the Duke game, AJ, and you're like, okay, this is kind of reverting to what we've seen when Carolina is just not the more aggressive team and they're getting punched in the mouth continuously. And again, there is no way of fixing it. The wheels were already off. The wheels were not going back on the car. It was over. That is another criticism that I see a lot of fans level at the team. And there are other aspects and things that we could focus on too. Catastrophic plays, these big chunk yards, these big things like this. Why is this always a continued theme under 3 different defensive coordinators? These are the things that I think more of the, I'm going to use the word level-headed fan base look at and say, I think a lot of people can take losing a little bit. There's a big section of the fan base that can't. They need to go 12-0 every year. If they don't, then it's negative. But I think there is a bigger portion and a larger majority of the fan base looks at it and says, okay, unacceptable losses. 3-2. That should be a little bit different. But why are we having these same conversations and same problems again? And particularly with that defensive side of the ball. And that I don't have an answer to. And that I'm not sure if Mack has an answer to either, because like the famous Roy Williams line that he talked to you, AJ, I think if he knew what the problem was and knew how to fix it, they wouldn't be having the problem anymore. So
are you talking about the F-bomb in 2009?
Yeah. There's two different ways to look at it, because I don't listen as much to the negative Nancy's that everything's doom and gloom, everything's bad, fire the staff, bring somebody new in. I listen to more of the people that come to me with those questions. And I say, I don't have an answer for it, because you would think by year 6, we would be having some different conversations about maybe some other weaknesses or other problems with the team. But it's like, even as someone we've covered the whole Mack Brown 2.0 tenure, I even feel like I get tired of having these same conversations, because we're sitting here trying to answer it. And I have no idea why the wheels fall off on the defense and they can't be fixed. And again, based on the theme of this, tenure, I think a lot of these problems should have been fixed, but haven't been fixed. And I don't know necessarily why that is. And again, I think that is a very fair criticism and a very fair frustration for fans to have.
North Carolina's defenses in Mack Part 2, and quite frankly, it goes back since
it goes back 20, 30 years.
My first game I ever covered was November 1996. So I was there at the end of Mack's 9th year, and then I covered a little bit of his 10th year. I wasn't there every day, but I covered them some. Since then, and the 2001 team was pretty good defensively. They had a couple ugly games early, but they were pretty good. Butch had some good defensive teams, but for the most part, this is a common theme throughout. When one wheel goes off, just wait a couple minutes, because the other 3 are going off too. They do not know how to stop, put a hand up, stop the slide, and reset in game. They can't do it. And it's part of what we talked about on Monday when people, you don't ask tough questions. No, we're asking, why don't your defenses fix themselves during games? What are the adjustment issues? And that's the problem. And I asked Mack about frustration setting in. And he first said panic, but then he went back and he went to frustration. And I agree, frustration allows more things to happen. And the reason the frustration has reached the level it is now is because there are so many guys in the program that have been down that path before, and they see what's coming and they don't know how to fix it because it's happened so many times they didn't fix it before. So until you do, you're not going to have confidence that it can happen. It's a mental game. This stuff is so mental. So I asked Mack on Monday, did some of JMU show up in the second half in Durham and psychologically affect your team? And in a nutshell, that's what I asked him. He said yes. So that's the biggest task this staff has, and I think it's had for a while. Isn't what they do during the week the game plan. It's what they do once the ball's kicked off and stuff starts to go sideways. How do you get back on track? Mm-hmm. And defensively, it has been horrid when it goes that way. It was horrid under Bateman. It was horrid under Chiswick. And now we've seen 2 weeks in a row where it's horrid under Collins. And that's just something that concerns a lot of people, because the one common thread with all that is the guy at the top of the program. So I get that. I get people's concern there. He knows it more than anybody else. He gets it and he's frustrated. And even with Elijah Huzzy, we asked him Tuesday when we talked to him about embarrassment and surprise. I've asked a couple of guys this week. I'm usually not the, hey, were you surprised kind of question guy. I usually don't do that. I think in this case, yes. Javari Ritzie the other night after the game. I mean, the look on his face, he doesn't know what to say, because he knows, because he's been on the field a lot, when it starts to spiral, there ain't nothing they don't know what to do. It's like they look around, we don't know what to do. We don't know how to fix this. And Huzzy said that he was embarrassed and was still embarrassed from JMU. So that lingers. They can say they cut the cord. And I get people in the program saying, oh, it's a great week of practice, they cut the cord. But the cord reappeared in Durham 8.5 midway through the third quarter. It's 20-0. Duke had 97 yards. Over the next 18 game minutes, Duke had 267 yards and 21 points. How does that happen? Mm-hmm. I know that Duke's got some talent. I know that Duke, they give scholarships too, as coaches like to say. But Duke shouldn't have done that to Carolina. Carolina did not fix whatever was going wrong. I don't know what the adjustments are because, like in JMU, I look back and watch the film. I couldn't see the adjustments because nothing was working. Bottom line is 20 missed tackles. Mack says players get frustrated and they start trying to compensate. And that's true because you got 11 guys on defense, and they always talk about being one of 11. Each has their responsibility. So if one guy is not playing well and another tries to compensate for him, instead of having 10 guys in position to make their play, now you only have 9. That's how you lead to catastrophics. That's how you lead to missed tackles because the angles change. And Gene Chizik used to talk about angles, about communication and angles. We hear him talking about communication too. So there's a lot to fix, and so much of it has nothing to do with putting a hand on the ground and banging somebody. It's got to do with up here. So whatever you do during the week, it's very difficult to fix up here until you get into a game and you fix it up here. That's the problem. There is a what can go wrong will go wrong thing at times with this football team, especially on defense. And I think that we might start seeing that on offense until there's some dramatic changes in how certain parts of the personnel perform, that it could be a huge problem moving forward, which is why a lot of people aren't very optimistic looking ahead. And why a lot of people look at year 6 and say, why are some of these problems still there? Georgia got run out early by Alabama, and somehow in the toughest environment you could possibly be in against the IT program, came back and took the lead.
Yeah.
Now, Georgia's got different players in North Carolina, but comparatively speaking, they were playing a common opponent, someone like them. So why were they able to do that? Why were they able to regroup and do that? And then North Carolina can't stop the flood against Duke. Can't stop the flood against JMU. That's different. North Carolina should always be better than Duke in football. It should be significantly better than JMU in football. Should have been much better than App State a couple years ago. You realize in the last 2 years in September, they gave up 40 fourth quarter points to a Sun Belt team, App State, and then 53 in the first half to a Sun Belt team in JMU. How do they not stop that? That, to me, is the biggest question. And I think it's the hardest one for Mack to answer. Otherwise, they would have fixed it.
Yeah, and I do also think on the flip side that especially a game like JMU or even App State a few years ago, even Duke in the fourth quarter, 111 rushing yards. I do think coaches can get all of the blame when that's not fair, because at the end of the day, AJ, especially I always go back to that JMU game, man. I refuse to look at Carolina's defensive personnel players and say they're that bad, because they're not. There's a lot of guys going to play in the NFL. Yeah, there's a lot of guys. And again, the players have to take responsibility too, is what I'm trying to say, because I think a game like JMU in a fourth quarter like Duke, there has to be somebody. Mack Brown talks all the time about player-led teams and how the best teams are player-led teams. And again, I'm not sitting over there on the sidelines in the defensive huddle when things go wrong. I don't know necessarily what the conversations are like, and if there's finger pointing and if there's not finger pointing, and what that whole dynamic looks like, or if there's somebody that's trying to rally the troops or trying to calm the guys down. I don't know. But what I do know is what I've seen on the field. And if you give up 53 points in the first half to JMU in the fashion that North Carolina did, I refuse to believe Jeff Collins is going over there. Mack Brown's going over the defense and be like, all right, guys, keep doing what you're doing. Great stuff. Let's keep giving up a touchdown every drive. I refuse to believe that's the conversation. I refuse to believe there aren't adjustments trying to be made. So I have to look at the players and say, they've got to be better too, because they're the ones going out there strapping the helmets on and going to make tackles. But again, we can talk about players and we can criticize the players all we want. I think it's fair to do that. But at the end of the day, and Mack Brown knows this more than anybody, it is his responsibility to fix it. Again, he is the head football coach. It is Jeff Collins' responsibility to fix it. It might not all be his problem. It might be guys on the field not listening to what they're telling them, or not making plays that they should make, and maybe not playing to the potential they can make, because when the wheels fall off for whatever reason, heads go a little bit and focus goes and people start to overcompensate, and then the wheels just start falling off more and more. But at the end of the day, it's their responsibility as a coaching staff to fix it and get the right tune out of the players and get the players back on track. So I do think fans can look at it from a little bit of too much of a simple view of like, it's the coaching problem. It's Jeff Collins' problem. Get him out of here and get a new defensive coordinator in. To me, it's not that simple when the theme and the theme throughout this tenure with these players, a lot of the same players, has been the same thing. They've got to take responsibility for it as well. But it's always the coaches that it comes back to. And they're the ones. It's a lot easier, AJ, to fire a coach and a staff than it is to get rid of all 100 some players on the football team. That's not how it works. So it's their responsibility to fix it. But I do think some of these performances you can look at and be like, man, from a player perspective, is there not somebody over there like, guys, we're not this bad. Calm down. We know what to do. We practice every single day. Stick to what we know and stick to how we've been taught to do this thing. Relax. It doesn't seem like that is being maybe communicated as well as it should be either. So it's not as black and white, I think, as people like to make it. There's a lot of different reasons that things blow up.
Or it's not being received as intended.
Yeah, it's not what's being heard is not being illustrated on the field. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I hate to go all basketball on you here, but one of the beautiful things about stories talking to former Dean Smith guys is they would say, at Cole Fieldhouse, the place is going crazy at Maryland. They're on a 12-2 run. Dean calls a timeout, a rare timeout. And he'll tell the team in the huddle, there's a billion Chinese that couldn't care less. Yeah. And he gives perspective and sort of lightens the mood. It's very different in football, obviously. You just can't call timeout and do that. Basketball coaches are right there. I mean, I see coaches and shouting instructions to guys in the corner right in front of them all the time. Football, it's a lot harder to do that, which is why you need to have leadership on the field in football. And I think defensive leadership has been an issue. Cedric Gray was really good at it, but Cedric used to sometimes get really uptight with teammates. And sometimes that would take away from what a good leader and good player he was. I don't know what the leadership is on defense right now. I know some of the guys that are supposed to be the leaders. One of them hasn't played the last 4 games. Now, he might play this weekend. If Rucker plays, it changes things for that defense. It allows them to be more of what Jeff Collins wants to be, because with all due respect to Tyler Thompson and Jabron Harvey and last weekend Jacoby Cowan, they are not Kamen Rucker. So you could do more Ruckers out there. You can disguise differently out there. And I think that'll give the team a little bit of a juice injection. But in the end, Kamen's been on the field for a lot of this stuff too before. So I don't know where to put the finger and say that's it. And I'm not sure the staff does, because they would have fixed it by now. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that they're a bad staff or a stupid staff or anything like that. I think when you're dealing in the mind and the psychology of sports, sometimes you need to have success. They need to just have a game where, they bow up and they do it against a good opponent. When things really start to spiral, give up 2 quick touchdowns with a bunch of chuck plays and then boom, slam the door. Mm-hmm. You see really good teams do that a lot. You see games where clubs score 2 quick touchdowns and then the other team, like, boom, Michigan, boom, that kind of thing, whoever. So Carolina doesn't generally do that. When the 14 usually turns into 28 real fast. We've seen that way too often. That to me is the most perplexing. 1A, 1B is not as significant because it doesn't happen as often, but it's the most perplexing thing of Mack Part 2.
Yeah.
And I'm not a coach. I'm not a psychologist. I don't know how this gets fixed other than it just simply happening organically. The right guys make plays. You get some voices on the field that are different, that resonate different than voices in the past, and it gets done. And by the way, 1B would be the punt issue. We'll get into that later. Yeah.
It's a collective. When things go off the rails like they do, it's a collective failure. It's everybody. It's the players. It's the coaches. It all goes hand in hand. It's not just one, or it's not just the other. It's not just one player or one coach. That's not how it works. It's a collective thing because of how it does. And I'm actually glad you brought up a basketball reference, AJ, because Roy talked about it all the time. To bring up another one. Roy, and I know two completely different sports. Let me just say that. Completely different sports.
Yeah, I know where you're going with this, and it is different, but it speaks to the psychology of sport.
What was Roy's message when things would go off the rails? Roy would say this all the time. He'd call a timeout, rare timeout, or something like that. And his messaging in press conferences and stuff was, we practice every day. The players know what to do. You guys dug yourself in this hole. You go get yourself out of it. There's that accountability aspect of it of, again, we prepare, we practice, we prepare for these 12 games a season, 365 days a year, whether it's a collective practice as a team or it's an individual workout. Yep. And I think that's another thing I hear a lot of. The reason I bring that up too, because I get a lot of questions from fans about that, of like, why is it that, again, when things go off the rails, someone can't kind of rally the troops and steady the ship, player, coach, whatever, and say, hey guys, we're not this bad. We do practice every day. We do know how to play football. We are talented kids. We're not you ain't got a bunch of 1-2 stars running around out there. There's some NFL guys that are going to play at the next level out there. Why aren't they able to fix it? And again, that's the question we don't have an answer to. And I think looking at the program, this is another reason fans are very critical of the coaching staff right now, is from the outside looking in, like fans are, when they see the same kind of things over years and years and years. And again, this goes back before the Mack Brown 2.0 era. But every coaching staff, they're going to say, well, obviously they don't know how to fix it either. And again, it's their responsibility to fix it.
Yeah.
And again, we don't have an answer for that. Nobody does, because again, I'll bring up the famous Roy quote, AJ, to paraphrase a little bit. If we knew how to fix the problem, don't you think we would have effing fixed it? And I think there's a little bit of that aspect in here of, and again, that is a criticism and a worry too, AJ, because why does nobody know how to fix it? And that is another question I get from fans all the time that I don't have the answer to. I have no idea how it can consistently happen. All I know is it does consistently happen. So it's a fascinating topic. It really is. Talk about it for hours.
What was the slogan when Mack Part 2 started? Do you remember what the slogan was?
Be the one.
Be the one.
Be the one.
And I think that's what it comes down to. Because you coach up units, you coach up individuals. Players have to make plays. Yes. Look at the kid that made that reception and touchdown for Alabama the other day.
Oh my God, fantastic!
17 years old.
He was unreal.
17 years old. He made a play. He was the one.
Yeah.
You know, Shelby Swanson will love this. Be him. This is a reference to the post game at Pittsburgh last year. Be him.
Feels like there's a lack of that on defense. It really does.
And to be the one, I don't hear about be the one as much anymore. Be the one. Shaz Surratt against Duke in 2019. We made the play at the goal line. He was the one. Somebody has to make that play. Somebody has to make a pick. Somebody has to make a great PBU. Somebody has to shed the offensive tackle and hit the quarterback. Somebody has to do that. Somebody has to knock the ball loose. Duke's moving down the field. They're about to go in. Boom, you force a fumble. You take the wind out of the opponent, and you regain yourself. You don't see that. You don't see enough of that. Be the one. Re-implement, be the one. And it's a great slogan. I thought that the way they used it was smart and wise, and you see it everywhere around the football center. It has to return because it's frustrating for coaches to sit out there. You're not a parent yet. I am. If you're a parent and you're listening, you know it's like you get a little frustrated sometimes when why don't they clean up their room? I've told them 600 times, you're never going to see the light of day until you clean up your room. And you go in there and there's 14 water bottles on the floor. They don't clean up the room. I get that. You're like, why don't they do it? Sometimes the kid just has to clean up the freaking room.
Yeah.
It's time to clean up the room, dude. Clean it up. Sometimes players have to make plays. So they're scholarship players. They're paid money now. They're different than they were before. They all want to aspire. They all aspire to be NFL players. So if you want to be an NFL player, as the staff says, you know, the film doesn't lie. It's all put it on tape, put it on film. You want to play at the next level, put it on film. So sometimes it's incumbent upon highly skilled, highly trained athletes to make plays. They have a lot of guys in that defense that are being watched by NFL teams. I know because I see the scouts in the press box and sometimes talk to them. All right. You look at the starting defense right now. Scouts watch every one of those guys. They have folders on every one of those guys, including some of the second team guys. And they haven't marked a whole lot lately when things are going bad. This guy stepped up, made a game-changing play. Because that doesn't happen. So it is more than just Mack. It's more than whoever the coordinator is during this period in time. It's a lot more than that. It's also incumbent upon the kids. They got to make plays. They got to find that next layer that they've rarely hit before and do it at the right time that changes a game. Got to be that guy. You got to be the dude that hits, 8 threes. You got to be RJ when he went for 42 in a close game. You know what I mean? We're going to use the basketball reference because RJ was the man. He was the one.
That's sports.
I go back to that kid from Alabama. There are a lot of things. Mack, Vince Young in the championship game. He was the one.
Yeah.
You got to have somebody be the one to make the play that changes a game. We don't see that a lot. I don't see it much on this team yet. They'll have an opportunity Saturday against Pittsburgh, whether it's in punt protection, and we want to get into that in a second.
We'll talk about that next.
That's a point of contention I've had for a long time. But against Pittsburgh, someone's got to make a play so Eli Holstein isn't just picking his way down the field. Someone's got to step up and make a play.
Yeah.
And change the game.
Mm-hmm. That's sports. That's how it works, man.
If that doesn't happen, they're probably not going to win that game, right?
No, I don't think so.
And then Georgia Tech with Haynes King, someone's going to have to make a play on him.
Yeah. I think a lot of it does come down to that at times. That's sports, any sport. Sometimes you just got to step up and you got to make a play because they're talented kids. Again, I keep saying it. These aren't bad players. I refuse to believe that.
You know, when Aaron Judge hits a game-winning home run or Shohei Ohtani goes, 50 and 50?
Yeah, unreal. Yeah.
It's not Boone's. Boone didn't get Judge did it himself. He's the one, right?
Yeah.
So you look at the using baseball, some pitching performances yesterday in the first day of the Major League playoffs. That's manager, but it's the player going out in there and just being the dude.
Yeah.
And the dudes have to be dudes. We talk about that a lot. Dudes have to be dudes. We did that with that defense a few years ago, and it was the most undude-like defense we had seen. And we stopped using that term because it sounded ridiculous after that. But it doesn't sound ridiculous to say sometimes dudes just got to step up and be dudes.
Yeah.
Put a cape on, make a play.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that's the message we're trying to kind of say here is it's not just a coaching staff fault. It's not just a player fault. It's a collective issue. But at the end of the day, when some of these stretches are as bad as they are, sometimes it just takes a player-led team to say, hey, guys, we know how to play. We're not bad players. Let's go out there and make a play. Let's relax and let's go out there and play the football we're coached to play every single day of the week. Because, again, I refuse to believe Jeff Collins is in practice like, all right, guys, this is how we're going to give up 500 yards to JMU or 600 yards to JMU this weekend. Let's go out there and work on that. That's not what they're working on. They are working on ways to stop the opponent. But when it comes down to it, and the wheels start falling off, AJ, there's just an inability from a whole team perspective to turn it around. AJ, real quick before we move on to punt, you mentioned that 2019 defense, and this is a criticism I get seen all the time labeled at Mack. It's the best statistically. That's the best defense he had. So
they were all Larry on that team. And the two linebackers, Gimmel played 10 snaps in his career before that season, and Chaz was a quarterback. Aaron Crawford played 90-something snaps up at Virginia Tech in that 6 OT game. Jason Strobridge, who played a couple of years with the Dolphins, he played a ton of snaps. Mm-hmm. You know, Miles Doran never came off the field.
Statistically, the best defense they've had by 20 spots. Second best was 2020 with number 65. And after that, it's been 105, 102, and number 75. Those are total defense stats at the end of the year. Again, that's a criticism I think gets labeled at Mack of, hey, these are your players. These are your guys.
I do think that psychologically, since you brought it up very quickly, I'm going to go here with this because I've had that brought up to me before. And I think that what you're dealing with there, you go the end of the 2018 was just horrid around the Keenan Football Center.
Yeah.
You know, when they had the shoe stuff and then Larry the shoe stuff broke the night before the ACC kickoff. In Charlotte.
I remember that. Yeah. And then Larry had
and then Larry had those inane comments about, we win wars because we play football and all that kind of stuff. Bubba calls the SID and says, Bobby Huntley says, you got to have him walk it back. Talk to me. So a couple of us get around Larry, give him a chance to walk it back, and he doubles down on it. So by the time we get to the first practice, 10 days later or whatever it was, the first practice in college football is the day that everybody's great. Everybody had a great practice and everybody's fired up. It's the easiest positive story a program could ever ask for. Larry wouldn't talk to us after the first practice. He coiled up in a corner and never came out because no coach ever comes out when they coil up in the corner. So it was a miserable season. So the guys that were on that team that were still there the next year, they were there with this sudden positive influx, this be the one, this legend who didn't have to coach again, came out of retirement and chose you guys. So there was a lot of mental positivity on that team, and they made plays. And what's interesting is that the Bateman defense kind of worked that year, but And I don't know why it worked more that year than the other years, other than the fact that there were guys on there that had so much negativity that they had endured really the last 2 years of Larry, that they felt like it was a new world, a breath of fresh air. They had this naturally infused by positivity, so they were just going to stay sharp, mind wide open, making plays. That's the only explanation I can give. Now there's a group out there against JMU, and certainly in the second half against Duke, where they're like, oh, I've seen this play before. I know how this goes. There's nothing I can do to stop it. So that extra reserve isn't there to stop it. Whereas in 2019, and Hall of Famer, he wanted us. We got to play for him. It's a totally different mindset, and mindset is enormous. It's enormous in anything we do in life, whether it's being in a marriage, whether it's being a parent, whether it's being an employee, whether it's being a boss, if you're a construction worker, if you're in a cubicle and your boss has the corner office and his doors closed 7 hours a day, how your attitude and how you go about those things is going to affect your productivity and how efficient you are and how consistently efficient you are. It's the same thing on a football field.
No, you're absolutely right. Last thing I'll say before we move on to the punt, the special teams kind of thing is you brought up a good point there of kind of new lease on life when a new coach comes in. This is a big thing. And I'm a massive soccer fan, massive Manchester United fan, massive European Premier League kind of fan. And there's a big phenomenon in soccer, a big thing in soccer. They call it the new manager bounce, where a new coach comes in and there's a period of time that can vary in length. It usually doesn't last too long, but sometimes it can last a long time, where a team that had to fire their coach and was really, really struggling gets this new lease on life, gets this new manager in, and the results improve dramatically and the product improves dramatically because you're working for somebody new. Maybe some players who weren't playing a lot under the previous regime are now playing. They feel like they have a little bit new lease on life and belief. But eventually, every time, essentially, teams revert kind of back to their median, back to their average, back to who they really are. And it's obviously different in college sports and college football, especially because, you're talking about European soccer. A lot of players will stay on the same team for years, and you can sign players during different parts of the year. It's different in football because you can have a big change in team every year. So there's a different element of that. But you saying that kind of reminded me of just what they call the new manager bounce, where again, you see that improved product because of the spirit's different, the vibe's different, the belief's different in the program, the atmosphere's different in the program. But eventually it kind of comes back to a norm. And then I think that's when it's really on a coach. And that's where they really earn their money of, okay, we're kind of past this honeymoon period. How do we get back to sustaining that level and building this program back up now that I'm really in the seat and really, driving this thing? That is a lot harder, in my opinion, than sometimes what you can do in that first year when the energy is just completely different. So
when you get a new car, you go out for a drive a lot and you turn up the stereo and you check it out.
Good.
You're just cruising along. You're like, man, this is great. 3 years later, you look back and say, man, I haven't gone for a drive in 6 months.
Yeah, I ain't washed my car in a month. You know what I mean? I used to watch it once a week. Yeah.
I'm going to vacuum. I'm going to keep this thing clean. I'm going to keep it spotless. The next thing you know, you've got leaves on the floor and God knows what else there. So I get it. I mean, I don't know if that's a great analogy, but I think people understand.
I think it is. I think I know exactly.
I think they're going to understand where we're going. And that goes back to 2019. Now there also are coaches and programs to sustain it, and it's fresh. So the kids at Georgia are just as excited every day in practice now as they were when Kirby first got there, maybe more so because he's proven himself to be a great coach. His first game was against Carolina in 2016 in the old Georgia Dome. And that club isn't close to what they are now, but they built from that. So that's why there are great coaches and there's everybody else. Most coaches get fired. Most coaches were really good at the mid-level, at the Mack or the AAC or whatever. They get hired at the Power 5 or Power 4, and they get fired. When people talk about, well, we just need to change, got to get rid of, well, he can get. You don't know who you're going to get. Is he going to stick around if he wins? Are you going to go back and look for a new coach in 3 years because the guy wins 10 years and Arkansas pays him twice as much? You got to think on a broader term, in a broader way about the program, about being disgruntled at winning 9 and 8, Orange Bowl down year 9, 8, and with a pretty good class coming Carolina fans, most don't realize this. You've got a potential generational type quarterback coming in next year.
Yeah.
With Bryce Baker were at North Carolina right now, he would be the starting quarterback. I
100%.
guarantee you that.
100%.
And there are other dudes coming in. The class of 26 is going to be a good recruiting class if nothing else changes. Sometimes coaches have a dip. It happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It takes time sometimes for things to build. I'm not defending Mack or promoting him to stick around, and I'm not saying he needs to go. That's not my job yet. I still think, as I said in my column Saturday night, they played 5 games or 3-2. Let this stuff play out.
Yeah.
Let it play out. Let's judge year 6 entirely when we're near the end of year 6.
Agreed.
We're at the end. And so there's a lot of – I'm telling you, man, Bryce Baker would be the quarterback. Oh, yeah. He's rated higher than Sam or Drake were.
He's unreal, man. Every time I check
a combination of the two. When you look at his height and what he can do, I'm telling you, man, when he steps on campus in January, he's QB1 the minute he steps on campus.
Yeah.
And he's 1,000%. The real deal.
Yeah.
He's the real deal. So it's not like everything sucks around the program right now.
No, it's not.
But one thing sucks is their punt protection.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. This is something people want to say we don't criticize the staff and, defend Mack all the time. We've been talking about this for 6 years, AJ, so I'm not going to hear that negativity. The special teams as a whole, really, but we're going to focus on the punt because we saw it rear its ugly head against Duke on Saturday with a block punt that honestly, I remember watching that play. Carolina gets the ball back because Duke just goes brain dead and decides they don't want to pick the ball up. I remember watching that on the field and being like, having an opposite thought in my head that I had about 30 minutes later of like, oh, Carolina's not losing this game if they try. Duke just blocked a punt in the red zone, their own red zone, basically, and they don't get the ball back because no one wants to jump on the ball. Carolina couldn't lose this game if they tried. 30 minutes later, I knew it was over because the wheels came off. But that continues to be a problem, AJ. It happened against JMU too. It's happened the last 5 to 6 seasons. It has been a consistent theme that special teams, for whatever reason, cannot be fixed and has not been fixed. It is just, they have some okay games once in a while, but I would say the average, AJ, the median is actively doing things to hurt the football team. Just go look at some games this year. We don't need to rehash it. But I think the reason we bring up the punt blocking is because one thing that you've been a little bit critical of, or I don't know if critical is the right word, but you've questioned pretty often is the guys, the shield that stands in front of the punter. Why is it linemen? You don't see that very often around the country. And you would think at that position, because Carolina's given up these block punts like they have this season, you would think you'd want guys that are obviously a little bit bigger, but have the ability to shift laterally very quickly. And I think that's a common criticism and a fair criticism to throw at it, because again, we're not making these criticisms up, AJ. We're not making up the fact that Carolina's had block punts in, back-to-back games. That's not us coming on here and making up things. That is a fact, and we've seen it, and we have seen special teams hurt this team again this year like it has over the last 5 seasons before. So what do you make of that? Because again, this goes back to the majority of the fan base criticism that we hear. I'm not talking about the negative Nancy's, I like to call them, who everything's doom and gloom all the time. I'm talking about the people that look at it objectively and say, okay, special teams has been overall pretty bad under Mack. Year 6, it's still hurting the team. Why is that? I don't have an answer for that. I don't think you have an answer for that, but it is something worth talking about because I do find it a fair criticism to be thrown at a staff in year 6.
I think the aspect of special teams that has been the one that has been consistently bad has been the punt protection.
Yes.
And it's amazing how close teams are to getting other punts. The JMU, before they blocked that punt, they damn near got one in the first quarter. So, or not in the first quarter, they got another one later on they nearly got because they got the one punt return. The block, I think, was to make it 11-0. It was later when they almost got another one. And the thing is, everybody knows it now. So teams go after. You don't see many teams just set up the old punt return.
Nobody returns punts
Carolina.
Anyway.
Carolina does that a lot. Carolina doesn't go after the punter very often. They want to just get the ball and get their quarterback in play and they get rolling. I get that, but maybe now when they don't have Sam or Drake back there, you got to be a little more aggressive. And
do you think that's the reason they don't? Because I've had conversations this year with fans.
Just get the ball. You don't want to. Well, with the defense that wasn't very good, you don't want to extend possessions. And if you have a roughing the punter that extends a possession and they get the better field position.
You rarely see Carolina
return thinking before, anyway. Which is also why I think that they've had a lot of fair catches. Let's just get the ball and get it in one of those guys' hands and get going. And it worked.
Yeah, I get that.
It worked. Okay. Yeah. Now I think it's different. Now they need to go out. They need to create offensive opportunities when not on offense. They're not forcing turnovers. 5 games, they have 5 forced turnovers. They got to force turnovers. They've got to go after the punter more. You've got a ton of athletes. Get after the punter. But with the punt protection, I don't understand having linemen back there. They're not quick. They're not. What happened at Duke, the guys coming off the edge, they couldn't get to them. It's a beeline. I like the idea of having tight ends back there. Tight ends are big. They can block. They're not going to be run right over. And if there's
maybe
there's an issue, but if you have a tight end, if you have a couple of tight ends back there, if there's an issue, let's say the punch dropped and then the play blows up, and they got to make something out of nothing. You got a tight end right there to throw it to. You've got tight ends that can see everything. Now linemen can see stuff too, but they're not looking down. They're not trained to look downfield. They're trained to look at the line of scrimmage more. So I just think that tweaking that, and there's got to be some other things. Mack was asked about it on Monday, and it came up. We talked to Larry Porter in August. He's the running backs coach and special teams coach. They won't name the players, and I get that. They won't even name the position, but if you watch the film, you know where it's coming from. But the consistency is they never say really what went wrong. And they say, we know what it is, we can get it fixed. But it's never the scheme. At some point, you just got to make some changes there. Because it doesn't work. You can lose a game on a block punt. Because I think that's the most devastating thing to happen on special teams. Because the other team gets the ball in great field position or they directly score. And when you get a punt blocked, that's being overwhelmed. That's almost like it's a show of weakness by the team that has the ball. Oh my gosh, we couldn't get a punt off. They overwhelmed us and they just crushed us. They swarmed us. And it looks weak. And it looks totally ineffective. And if that becomes a problem, and I think that contributed to a 20-yard punt by McGinnis because he knows people are coming. He can hear, he probably, the old bull with the snot and the smoke coming from the nose. You can see that on the edge. Yeah. And he knows that there's a good chance they won't pick him up. So that is my criticism about the punt team. I'm not going to go into other areas, but I think that that's something that I don't know how they fix it other than maybe making some personnel changes, the types of personnel that's there, but it's happened enough that it's a fair criticism. And it's one of those kind of things that if any coaching regime, not specifically this one, anyone that has that problem, when their time ends, that's one of those things that finds its way into the third graph of the story. Coach Joe is no longer with the program. And the third graph, well, he had 9 punts blocked, 4 directly for touchdowns, 4 more led to touchdowns, and 1 led to a field goal.
Yeah,
and those are game changing because it's position change, field position changing, and those are game changing plays. Mack talks about got to make game changing plays. He has said before, he's recently said we got to make winning plays, game changing positive plays on special teams. But most coaches will say you cannot lose the game on special teams. You don't necessarily need to win the game on special teams, but you can't lose it on special teams. If you don't lose it on special teams, then it becomes an offense versus defense. Then it becomes those 2 phases. This team has put itself in jeopardy a lot by getting punts blocked and lost games or set themselves up to lose games with the punts that are blocked. Remember NC State a couple years ago? That was horrific. And that game blew up right in their face. So, yeah.
You're absolutely right. There's no excuse for it. It needs to be fixed. Again, all these punt blocks, you might look at and look at the film and be like, okay, that wasn't necessarily Mack's fault that the guy didn't block somebody. But ultimately, it comes back to, like I keep saying, the theme of this podcast for me is not everything's his fault, but everything is his responsibility.
Exactly.
That's how I look at it.
Yeah, and before we go to Pittsburgh, let me just reiterate one more time, as I did in my column the other day. Not everybody in the fan base is upset. And Mack said this in the press conference Monday, and I totally agree with him. It's the people who are upset are usually the loudest, because if you're okay or you're going to sit back and wait, there's no point in being loud. There's no point in being vociferous. It's the disgruntled ones it's the protesters. Guys that are happy, they're not going to go out in the streets and say, we're happy with everything. It's the people who aren't happy that take it to the streets. So I get that. And I don't think the whole fan base feels that way. Now, I do think that there's a lot of concern, and it will probably be reflected in the turnout on Saturday. And that's unfortunate. But it's probably going to be the case. But there have been a lot of good things that have happened in Mack Part 2, and there still could be good things that happen in Mack Part 2. I did a drop for Tuesday, and I wasn't projecting it, and I'm not trying to sell anything, as some people on Twitter said, but there is a possibility that this team actually closes strong and reverses a trend of the last 2 years. Because when you look ahead at the schedule, after they get through Georgia Tech, it's not that tough, except going to BC. Everything else is very winnable for this team in its current composition, how it's currently constructed. They can win a lot of those games toward the end of the season. So we don't know if this thing ends up going well toward the end. Right now, I think they're in the toughest part of the schedule at Duke, Pitt, and Georgia Tech. That tells you how light the schedule is. And I think that will be another thing that some people who are sort of ready to get Mack to go, they're going to point to the schedule. But I'm also going to point to the fact that they lost their starting quarterback in the first game when he was getting going. And people can say, oh, Mack sucked. 47 touchdown passes, 12 interceptions in the SEC. Doesn't suck.
No.
Pretty good.
He didn't play enough to say he sucked either.
Yeah, he didn't play well in the first half.
No, I agree with that.
But they were trying to figure it out. They don't have an exhibition game. Yeah. There's no preseason games in college football like that.
Which is ridiculous. It's stupid, but
yeah. So they started getting comfortable with him in the third quarter, and then he goes out. If Max Johnson's healthy, who knows? They definitely don't lose Duke game. They're going to be a little bit more better offensively. They scored 3 points in their last 8 possessions at Duke. The Max Johnson that I've seen play in college before he got to North Carolina was better than that. Mm-hmm. And people in the program will tell you that in August, Max was playing like he had 2 years of eligibility left, and people in the program were convinced he was going to be there 1 year. By the time they got to game week, they thought, man, he's playing so well, and they know what so well looks like there, that he's going to be gone after 1 year. He's going to the NFL. Mm-hmm. I told everybody during that month, once he put pads on, he started to separate significantly from Connor, and he did. That was not a close battle at the end. Max was playing very, very well. So we don't know what could have been. Maybe the offense would have been better in stretches against JMU, and maybe that game turns differently. And you never know. Mm-hmm. But people need to understand that they're playing their third string quarterback right now. And I'm not disparaging Jacoby. I think he's done well. He's got a wonderful story. And in time, hopefully his full story will come out. We know what it is, but
it's fantastic.
We'll wait for the right time for that story to come out. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it will be, how much he wants to say. But he's a wonderful kid. But he's third string quarterback. He was third team at Arkansas last year. He was third string. He was told he wasn't going to play. And he came in to start the fall camp 20 pounds overweight. He didn't think he was going to play. And now suddenly he's thrust in there as QB1, and it is going like warp speed right now for him. Suddenly he went from I'm not going to play to warp speed. So you've got to cut a little bit of slack on that. You don't have Drake or Sam back there. You don't have Bryn Renner back there. You don't have TJ Yates. You don't have Darian Durant. This program has been pretty fortunate with some really good quarterbacks this century. Right now, they're in a very transitional period at that position. And they're playing a guy who was told he wasn't going to play and showed up to camp 20 pounds overweight. He's lost the weight. But they are very much a work in progress. They're still trying to get their identity on offense. Mack said that and Chip Lindsey said that. So understand that when you're highly critical, make sure you look at all the prongs to the story, not just a few prongs.
Yeah, you're completely right about that. 100%. I couldn't agree more with that. And yeah, maybe it gets fixed again. And my message going in, I told you off camera, AJ, we're going to go into the Pitt preview right now, but you'll see it on the thumbnail of this video too. For me, it's make or break time, man. And again, AJ, we saw Carolina. We've talked a lot about the wheels falling off. Lost to Virginia last year, never recovered. Season was over. Lost to Georgia Tech the year before, never recovered. Season was over. This is a opportunity of collapse. I'm not going to use the word collapsing, but really, 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 really struggling, losing back-to-back games you shouldn't have lost early in the year. How do you respond to it? Especially with the favorable schedule coming up. Not necessarily this weekend against Pitt, because this is the hardest game for me that Carolina's faced this year, and arguably might be the hardest game they played this year when you look at the schedule. And then Georgia Tech the week after, a team they just cannot beat and have had some catastrophic meltdowns against. this is the time we're going to learn about what Mack and this program's really made of. Can he turn this ship around, or do they lose the next two? Carolina's sitting at 3-4. He had lost 4 in a row, and I don't think anybody's betting on him recovering after that. So for me, these next 2 weeks start with this Pittsburgh game, 2 home games especially. Then you got a bye week. These next 2 weeks are where we're going to learn what this program's really made of and what Mack's trying to preach of, hey, it ain't over yet. All right, go win these next 2 games, and people will start believing that a little bit more. If you go lose 2, maybe you lose 1 and win 1, these conversations are going to keep being had again, because these are also, I think every game on Carolina's schedule is winnable, but I also think every game on Carolina's schedule is very losable too. And that's,
it's a fair question. Mm-hmm. It's a fair question because it's happened before. It's not like we're making stuff up, but was JMU Georgia Tech in 22 and Virginia in 23? Did the collapse, for lack of a better word,
happen a lot earlier? Yeah.
Happen a lot earlier. Because what's wild is Virginia came in and beat them. JMU's from Virginia, beat them in Kenan Stadium. And the next week, Carolina imploded late defensively. And last year, after Virginia, the week later, they went to Georgia Tech, gave up 244 yards rushing in the fourth quarter. So they did something not nearly as bad statistically, but 111 in the quarter, 110 or whatever it was, still really bad. So that's a trend. So does it continue? This game will signal whether JMU is UVA 23, Georgia Tech 22. Mm-hmm. Really, I think it's fair to look at that way, and
I think it is too.
That's one of our jobs, because we're using the past to gauge right now and perhaps the future.
Yeah. Again,
it's a very losable game. So is Georgia. If they're 3-4, they go into an open date, having lost 4 in a row. Man, if I've already written my Mack hears the noise and he's okay with it piece. That ran Wednesday morning. Mm-hmm. What's the piece in 2 weeks when they've lost 4 in a row?
I know. And again, you want to shut that noise up, a lot of that noise, go win football games.
Yeah, and this is a good team coming in that has a 300-yard passing quarterback who originally went to Alabama. Sat out last year as a freshman, transferred. He's good. They've got a really good ground game. They got a couple of Western Carolina transfers that are studs there. Their running back is super fast, kid from Western Carolina. They have a 300-yard a game quarterback, and they're averaging 208 yards rushing. Oof.
Good team, man. And
it's a Narduzzi defense. They're not great defensively yet, but they think that they're getting better. Mm-hmm. And I don't think Carolina will pose the same challenges to them that it has in the past. And they've done a pretty good job for the most part against Sam and Drake. They certainly did against Sam some. Sam's last game, you remember the overtime loss in the monsoon up there. Well, it was a monsoon when Carolina had the ball, and the skies cleared when Pitt had the ball. It was one of those things that people got to chuckle at. But this is a huge game. It's a huge game that if they lose and it's very competitive, that might be, I'm not going to say is okay, but at least it's competitive and depends on how things go. But I really think they need to win the game. I'm not going to call it a must-win game. I'm going to call it a need-to-win game.
Yeah.
And Pitt's not that great. Look, Cincinnati had them on the ropes. Pitt came back and somehow won on the road there. West Virginia had them on the ropes. Pitt somehow came back and won. And as we see Cincinnati and West Virginia now, they're not that good. They're okay.
No, they're not.
I don't think they're any different than North Carolina, probably. Maybe West Virginia might be a little bit better. Mm-hmm. But Carolina could win this game. And as we just said, what happens if it's 4 in a row? What happens if they win the next 2 and they're 5-2 going into the open date?
That's how you shut up that noise, man.
And the open date, then they have at UVA at FSU. I would favor them to win both those games right now. Then there's another open date. And the open dates that are coming up are so important because of getting the identity of who they are on offense and then fixing other things. Some teams have already, everybody gets 2 open dates this year. Some teams have already had 1. And for this club, now they know who they think their quarterback's going to be the rest of the way. Like they started their season against JMU offensively because it's a different quarterback, and he's very different than the other 2. They somehow can win a couple here, be 5-2, to go to the open date. They could throw stuff out that doesn't work with Jacoby, add a few things that do work with Jacoby, and then win two more. and then have an open date, and they can continue to do that and fix some of the other things on defense. I think the schedule sets up pretty well for them if they are a team that doesn't allow negativity on defense to just spiral out of control, and if the offensive line can protect better, and if Jacoby Criswell is indeed improving each week. Those are three big ifs.
Yeah, big ifs.
And if I'm not a Vegas guy, I'm not a betting guy, but if I went to Vegas and Guido the leg breaker had a gun to my head and said, you got to wager a bet on this, I wouldn't wager that those three things would happen, or at least quickly.
No, I agree. I completely agree with that.
It's certainly on the table, but it begins with this game this week. I think if they beat Pitt, there would be a huge confidence boost that is very needed for this group. I don't think it's the most confident football team in the world right now. No,
and confident. Yeah, winning's not going to solve everything in this situation, but it solves a whole heck of a lot, and it shuts up a lot of that noise. It really does, and I think it's that simple for me. I mean, Matt can sit there and talk about noise and deflect it at me. It's all right, man. You don't want to hear that anymore. Go win some football games. That's what people want to see, and you will be shocked how the mood shifts in the fan base if Carolina wins these next two games. But the big if is got to win these next two games. And based on what we've seen over the last couple of years, AJ, when things fall off a cliff when things go off the rails, they go off the rails. Carolina winning these next two games is, like you said, if I'm a betting man, I'm not necessarily betting on that happening based on what I've seen over the last 2 weeks.
It's not just the next two. It's just those three things all happening, and they close the season strong.
Exactly.
There are not a lot of indicators to suggest that it will happen, but it can happen. That's the thing.
Yeah, agreed. Let's dive into Pitt real quick, and we're not going to spend too much time talking about him because we already talked about him a little bit, but dive into him a little bit. Interesting stat too, AJ. Carolina's 7-0 against Pitt in Chapel Hill. They did lose a home game in Charlotte to them since 1974. So Carolina, really good record. We even remember some of those, one of those bad Fedora teams even managed to beat Pittsburgh.
Well, they had that in 16, they had that miracle comeback win.
Yeah, I was at that game.
Switzer had like 4 straight fourth down receptions.
I think it was Bug Howard with the winning touchdown.
Bug Howard, yeah. And then the next week, I think it was the next week, Carolina went to FSU. And Nick Weiler hit that at 53-yarder or whatever.
Tomahawk chop sprinting down the field.
I have a photograph of the divot in the grass from where he kicked that ball. It's pretty cool.
Should have cut out and took it with you.
I still have it on my phone right here.
Yeah, that's fantastic. But focusing on Pitt. So again, Carolina, good record against Pitt at home. So I guess that's a positive if you want to focus on some positivity going into this one. But Pitt, like AJ mentioned, wins over Kent State, at Cincinnati, West Virginia, and Youngstown State. They are coming off a bye week. And again, offense, that's the strength of this team. They've been really good this year. Second best offense statistically in the ACC right now behind Miami. They're averaging 522 yards per game. Diving into it a little bit further, fourth in passing offense under first-year offensive coordinator Cade Bell, who did come from Western Carolina, eighth in rushing offense, averaging 48.5 points per game. Now, one of the reasons maybe they're a little bit lower in rushing, they do have a really good running back. He did miss their last game, but he will be back.
Look at their points.
Will be back against Carolina. Yeah,
they're fifth in the country in scoring. 48.6, I think it is.
They put up points, man. They put up points big time. And Eli Holstein, man, Alabama transfer quarterback, really impressive numbers this year. Over 1,000 yards passing, 12 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions. He's been the guy for them. It's amazing what a quarterback can do for you. You have a good quarterback back there, as Carolina fans have seen the last couple of years. You can win a lot of football games and have a lot of success on offense. So he's the main man for them, and he's been fantastic. But it's not just him, AJ. Like I just mentioned, Desmond Reed did miss the last game, only played 3 games this year. He will be back. He's a Western Carolina transfer at running back. Again, he will be back for the Carolina game. Third best back in the league right now statistically, and 5th in all-purpose yards despite not playing 1 game. So he's a threat too. You can't just stop Eli Holstein. You got to stop the run against them as well.
He's a mighty mite. He's fast.
He's good, man.
And he's a guy that makes you miss tackles because he screws up your angles because he's so fast.
Yeah.
We saw what Star Thomas and his speed on the edge did last weekend. This kid's faster.
Mm-hmm.
So, but Holstein, by the way, 6'4", he can run. Holstein can run.
Big kid.
Now, I asked Elijah Huzzy 2 things about Pitt's offense. One, he said, yeah, Holstein's really good, but he said their receivers are it. Mm-hmm. Like they're physical, they can get open, they can grab contested balls, so the corners are going to be really tested. The other thing is that he said, Holstein, you want to try to keep him into a pocket, but you also want to make him throw on the move. One thing I will say that could be something to watch for Carolina in this game is that Pitt's allowed, I think, 39 QB hurries. and 12 sacks through 4 games. So they haven't been great protecting the quarterback. And 2 of those defenses are Kent State, which is a mess, and Youngstown State, which is FCS. And it's not like, I think West Virginia's got some pretty good athletes on defense. They got a couple of dudes that can play in the NFL, but they've given up some hurries. They've given up some sacks. They forced him to move. He's not as good throwing on the run, but if he tucks it and runs, he could pick up some first downs. I think he has 12 first downs, running first downs this year. So for a 300-yard type quarterback, you see some May in there. Drake would run for some first downs, but also throw for a lot of yards. He's not Drake May, but pretty good. You're a redshirt freshman, and he's throwing for 300 plus in 3 straight games. And let's not forget that Nick Saban brought him to Alabama.
Yeah, he's got some talent, I would think.
They don't. They're not bringing Harvey Schmedl up there. He's nobody wanted. Who Alabama beats out Furman for.
No, he's good, man. He's been very impressive, especially when you dive into those numbers. I think he's the best quarterback Carolina's faced this year. You did mention the receivers too. You got, 6 receivers with over 12 or more catches. You got 5 of those receivers with 164 or more yards on the season. Kanata Mumpfield been the guy for them. 20 receptions, 315 yards. And AJ, big play offense too. 5 of those receivers averaging 12.6 yards or more per catch. So this is a team that, again, they spread the ball around. You can't just stop one of these receivers. Great quote from Mitch and Huzzy there, because he's right. You look at these receivers, this is not just a 1, 2, 3 wide receiver heavy unit where you just kind of shut down one guy and they'll be all right. They've got a lot of guys who can do it. Oh, and they got a pretty dang good running back too, one of the best in the league, despite not playing 1 game. And a lot of teams have played 5 games. Don't forget that as well. So through 3 games, still one of the statistically the best backs in the league. So this Carolina's defense, man, coming off that Duke second half, is going to have its hands full on Saturday.
Well, in the offense, Narduzzi likes to bring it. We saw the last 2 weeks teams that bring a lot of pressure, give Carolina trouble.
Physical
JMU, I think, had the blueprint for a lot of that, and Duke picked it up and magnified it. So they will bring guys. Pitt has always been very comfortable in man coverage, and they've had a lot of good DBs. They sent a lot of DBs. They sent a lot of receivers, DBs to the NFL. They're big, strong kids, so Carolina's receivers are going to have to get out of their breaks really well, and Jacoby's going to have to see them when they do. There's still that connectivity issue right now with Jacoby and the receivers, which is understandable.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to take advantage of those opportunities. Pitt hasn't been great defensively, but this is one of those games where I could see Pitt getting well defensively if Carolina doesn't handle some stuff. If they don't pick up the blitz as well, that's just the general pressure. You show blitz a lot, bring 4. How do they handle a 4? And then being able to, and Jacoby getting rid of the ball quickly and getting it to dudes the minute they're open to take advantage of some of that stuff, because they're going to be defended well in the corners. I like this Pitt team a lot. I don't want to make them out to be like they're Georgia and Alabama and Ohio State, but there's a lot of impressive things about them. I still think Carolina can beat them because Carolina's got a lot of talent, and maybe the talent steps up and takes care of business. Plus, this is the ACC. Don't ever say any game is a lock, because that's, how many people thought Miami was going to beat Virginia Tech by 4 touchdowns?
Thought Florida State was going to win a national championship this year, AJ.
Yeah, exactly. So, and Narduzzi has a tendency at losing a head scratcher.
Yeah, 100%, man. It definitely does.
Some people, this would qualify as a head scratcher. I think Carolina's got as much or more talent than Pitt. It's just that Pitt's talent is in spots right now that Carolina doesn't have, and it's a little bit more together because it's 4-0, but who knows how Pitt's season turns out.
Yeah, just to talk about the defense, just some stats on them. 8th ranked defense in the league right now, giving up 342 yards per game. So kind of the middle of the pack in that respect. And 5th worst passing defense in the league, allowing 231 yards per game. I'll provide some context for Carolina fans who are just railing Carolina's defense. Carolina's right behind them, 232 yards per game. So not a much better passing defense than Carolina is right now, just to provide a little context to that. But, Rasheem Biles at linebacker, 2nd in the ACC in tackles for loss. He's going to be looking to get after the quarterback on Saturday. And AJ, they go back and watch that second half against Duke. I think this Pittsburgh defense is going to be licking their lips at the pressure they can get, because we talked a lot about the defense in this game. There's been a lot of criticism of the defense looking back at the Duke game, but I said it in 3 things, AJ. All Carolina needed to do was get another field goal, and they win that game at Duke, and we're having a different conversation right now. There needs to be a little bit blame on the offense as well, and I thought the offensive line had its worst performance in that second half all season. I thought they were atrocious at times.
2nd and 1 at the 9, first possession of the second half. 2nd and 1 at the 9, and there's the holding call on Nesbitt that I would imagine was one of the plays that Carolina turned into the ACC office this weekend.
I wouldn't blame them.
And Marion picks up 2 yards. They have first and goal at the 7. It looks like they're going in to score a touchdown. They go up 24-0. You were there. You saw how many fans left at 20-0.
It was over.
The student section went from full to 60% capacity in 5 minutes when Carolina made it 20-0. If it was 24-0, it'd have been at 40% capacity. That would have been almost insurmountable. And Duke's never overcome a larger deficit than 21 to win a game in its history.
Mm-hmm.
So that would have been huge, and it didn't happen. Penalties have been an issue where they have 26, I think it is, in the last 2 games. But I'm sure if you were to seek a truth seeker somewhere in the football center in Chapel Hill, they would tell you, about half of those never should have been called.
Yeah, maybe that is true.
And they turned them in, and they were. I do believe, since we're talking about this, and I asked Mack on Monday, I said, I don't want to get you in trouble, but are they letting guys, receivers and DBs jostle more? And by doing that, do they then throw perplexing flags at times later in the game? It's like in baseball, when an ump is giving the bat or giving the pitcher the outside corner, batters have to adjust. And if they're giving the outside corner and the pitcher knows that and he's starting to paint the outside corner, all of a sudden in the 5th inning, they're not calling that a strike anymore. That's frustrating, and you got to be consistent. The correlation here is with DBs. I've seen a lot of jostling this year, and there was a lot of it going on the other day. That all of a sudden you get a PI call in the end zone that's not nearly as egregious as some of the things that they let go early in the game. That's what bothers coaches the most, because you gauge on how you can play in some of those areas based on how the game is being called. And if you got away with this 5 times previously, and suddenly in the end zone it gets called, that could be very significant in a game. I think that's one of the beefs that all coaches have, not just the one that I cover, the coaching staff that I cover. So that is very interesting, and that'll be something to watch this week, because I do think there's been a little bit of a snowball effect on some of the turnovers and penalties, and there have been some really dumb penalties. Yeah. Some of the things they've done the last couple of weeks have not been smart. When it's 1st and 35, you should never deal with that. You're hurting yourself. Yeah, so veteran guys like J.J. Jones have got to be smart. They got to know when to dial it off, pull it off, pull back from it, and not do stuff like that. So that'll be interesting to see, too, what kind of penalties, how the game is called, and how many penalties Carolina has.
Yeah, I was 10 feet away or less from that Caleb Cost pass
right there,
in the end zone. Yeah. For me, I was on the field the whole second half. I saw a lot more physical play between two, and I can understand maybe why they threw it. But in that situation, 3rd down, AJ, that flag's not thrown. Again, could be having a different conversation right now. I'm not saying Duke might not go for it on 4th down.
Duke would have needed to score again, because that would have been a field goal. It would have been 20-17. And this isn't sour grapes. This is not, hey, pro Carolina sour grapes. No. This is in general. It's the inconsistency of how games are called in general. It could just as easily affect the other team, and probably does in some ways. We just don't zero in on the other team like we do Carolina, because that's what we cover. But I thought that was a very crucial point in the game. And you got a young guy back there who's trying to get better, who's kind of waffling back and forth as we're watching him go through growing pains right in front of us, to make a play and have the made play kind of taken from you in that situation magnifies the level of frustration by teammates, by him, and from the staff.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I just, being so close to that, I was like, I don't know. In that situation, I don't love that power. But again, doesn't mean Carolina would have won the game. And there's a lot of reasons Carolina lost that game besides just maybe some questionable penalty calls at times. A thousand different, which I think we've discussed enough in this podcast.
Yeah, the refs didn't miss 20 tackles. The refs didn't give up 19 hurries. The refs didn't blow a 20-0 lead.
He only scored 3 points in the second half.
The refs didn't have a punt blocked, even though Carolina kept possession.
Yeah.
Yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, there's whooped at the line of scrimmage. And again, I'll say my keys real quick, AJ. I'm keeping it simple, man. I'm keeping it basic. Got to get back. This team's got to get back to basics, man, and they got to start winning those battles in the trenches again. That for me was the biggest problem against Duke in the second half. I thought the offensive line was just out physical, and Criswell was getting way too much pressure on. They struggled to run the ball as well. Criswell is a guy in his second career start, AJ, and he's running for his life.
His first one was 3 years ago against Wofford when he and Drake split the game. But that's his second FBS start against an FBS team.
You got to protect him if you want to do stuff. And again, I keep saying it. get on the defense all you want. I completely understand it. But the fact of the matter is, AJ, Carolina scores one more field goal in that game. We're having a different conversation right now. That's just a fact. They had a chance to do it too. Got to get back to basics on that side of the ball. Same thing on defense. It was the same. AJ, you get rushed for 111 rushing yards in the fourth quarter alone. I don't really know how much of that is X's and O's at some point, and it just comes down to making plays and being physical at the line of scrimmage. I mean,
20 missed tackles, Jacob.
You got to. This team has to get back to basics,
20.
and they have to start winning the battles in the trenches, or they're not going to win many, if any, games the rest of the season. That's how I feel.
My keys:
got to do that.
O-line, D-line, be the one.
Yeah. It's that simple for me, man. You want to see an improved product on defense, and you want to see an improved product on offense. It all starts in the trenches. Football is not rocket science. It's really not. That's where it starts. And if you're going to keep getting out physical at the line of scrimmage, AJ, you're going to continue to lose football games in bad fashions like Carolina has. So if we're having a conversation, after the game or next week's pod or whatever next week, and we're talking about both lines of scrimmage struggling again, I can guarantee you we're not going to be talking about a Carolina victory over Pitt. So that, I think it's that simple in my opinion. Real quickly, I've got a subscriber question that I wanted to bring up real quick from one of our subscribers on Twitter, Tarhill0910. And he does preface this by saying this might be more of a question for Andrew Jones to ask at a press conference, but I do think it's an interesting one. I'd like to know, what adjustments did the coaches see from the Duke offense after the first half, and why the UNC defense wasn't able to overcome those adjustments? We've talked about that a little bit in here.
Yeah, I asked.
And just for me to answer the question, I know you did mention it to Mack too, but from somebody just watching the game in the second half, I always go back to that 111 rushing yards in the second half, and how it wasn't really the Duke was saying, we are going to beat you through the run, and they had success doing it, and Carolina didn't stop it. I think that's a very simplistic way of looking at it, but what did Mack say about that? Because I do think it's interesting.
I don't think Duke's intent was, we're going to come from behind using a run. I just think they ran the ball, had success, and stuck with it. Stuck with it. I asked Mack and I asked Jeff Collins, and Jeff doesn't get into anything because he doesn't want to give anything away, but they both said guys trying to do too much. That was what went wrong. It wasn't so much what Duke did. It was guys trying to do too much, as I alluded to an hour ago when I said, you got 11 out there. You're one of 11 and you'll be fine. But when one guy is entrusted to do his one of 11 and someone compensates for him, suddenly it's 9 doing their responsibility, which means 2 aren't. That leads to explosive, sometimes catastrophic plays. So that's what it was. It was more Carolina not communicating well and getting frustrated, not handling the frustration, and guys not trusting teammates, which is the lack of confidence overall. So that's what it was, more than anything else. I couldn't get anybody to answer a specific, what did Duke do differently? They took it all on themselves. It wasn't what Duke did, it was what they did. So if we're taking them at their word, that means that they're in control of how they handle Saturday against Pitt.
Yeah, it's simple, man. Yeah, exactly. Duke just started running the ball.
Teams adjust all the time.
Yeah,
there's constantly adjustments going on, from the splits that the linemen use to some of the wrinkles, some of the eye candy. Teams make adjustments all the time on offense. Defenses must adjust accordingly, and sometimes the defenses can force changes as well. Sometimes teams will just change it up to just keep changing it up. Duke, honestly, in the second half, or once they started getting going, where's Star Thompson getting the ball? Run on edge.
Couldn't stop it. I mean, it's
a few receptions. Murphy was better. Murphy stunk in the first half. He's better in the second half because they got the ground game going. So
exactly.
One thing leads to another. Isn't that what the great early 80s, mid 80s band The Fix said? One thing leads to another.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think from just a very simplistic perspective, Duke was like, oh, we can kind of run the ball here. Let's just keep running the ball. And Carolina couldn't stop it.
They're not great. They're good. They have some good songs.
Yeah, but they're not
Red Skies at Night was good. But one thing leads to another was their biggest hit. It's not a great band. It's okay band.
Solid band.
I think it's great.
Yeah, not anything to write home about. No Hall of Fame or anything like that.
Jacob has no idea what I'm talking about.
No, probably heard the song. I guarantee you I've heard the song, but I don't know the band off the top of my head. Before my time a little bit too. I'm more of a 70s music, 60s music kind of guy. I'm not 80s. Some good music in there, but not maybe more of a 70s music guy, me personally.
A lot of great music in the 80s. A lot of terrible music in the 80s.
Yeah, like every other era. A lot of terrible music in 20.
Hey, I'm going to see Morrissey.
Oh, nice, man.
Morrissey was lead singer of Smiths. Durham, Deepak.
Oh, cool. Yeah. That'll be sweet.
I don't have a game that day. It's a Saturday. It's the day after I come back. I come back from Kansas that day and go straight to the DPAC, basically.
That'll be good, man. Heck yeah, that'll be fun.
DPAC, whatever it's called. He's the lead singer of Smiths. Going to see him. So I saw The Cure last year. Seen in excess. Never. So I'm trying to make sure I see all these bands before they die.
No, I completely understand.
I saw in excess before. Their singer died a long time ago, but you know how I feel about them.
Those are your guys right there. And I mean, everybody listening to this got some band like that. I mean, everybody does. Yeah. Some have multiple, but
it's not the fix. Although I did have a couple fixed CDs back in the day because I had like 900 CDs. So way back
the CD days were the good days, man. I experienced a little bit of it before it kind of went to MP3s when I was younger, but having a nice collection.
The CD days were like I had in Alexandria, one of my buddies and I, we had a bachelor pad. And the thing with the walls were pine green, had brass silver. It's like you're in a damn bar. That's pretty much what it was. And we had this massive, his speakers, I swear, were like this high. It's back in the day when you had the big speakers.
Yeah,
he was a techno freak. Anyway, whatever was playing, CD had to be up, like on display, so everyone knew it was playing. They do that like at Starbucks and stuff. Whenever they're playing, they would used to put the CD up there. I don't know if they haven't been in a Starbucks in years, but it always had to be up there. So at some point in time, I'm sure the fix CD was up there for like 2 songs. Then you pulled it down and put something else up there. So way back in the day, man.
Great.
That was back in the bachelor pad days.
Yeah, man.
That's when the front door was a revolving door of fun.
Yeah, 100%, man. I had a little bit of that in my day too. It's just, those are the good old days, man. Yeah, especially when you look back. It's fantastic. Everybody has them too. Everybody listening to this knows what we're talking about. It's fantastic, man. Fantastic. AJ, before we head out, I got a random question for you, non-football related. I want to throw at you. This is not impromptu and it's not a very hard question. I just want to get your opinion on this. The reason I'm doing it is because I keep seeing a lot of uproar about this on Twitter. A lot of people really upset about this. And I know you're a guy who's been in sports media for a long time. You have no idea what I'm about to ask you. So unrelated. Greensboro Coliseum, First Horizons Coliseum now. Are you as pissed off about that as everybody on Twitter is? Okay. I'm actually a little surprised by that. I didn't think you cared.
I've clicked the camera off, but I don't want to be that gross. It will always be the Greensboro Coliseum anytime I cover something.
Yeah, I'm going to call it that too. Yeah.
I mean, they held out so long for naming rights. But I wonder how much I don't know how much they're paying. I haven't read the articles, but there's not a lot of crap that goes on there. How much could they possibly be paying?
It's a great place too. You think
it's my favorite place to cover a basketball game because I'm a big nostalgia guy. All right. In the press room for the media at the Greensboro Coliseum is such a comfortable place in that the walls they're not originals, but copies of all kinds of newspaper front pages from the Greensboro Daily News back in the day. I think that's what it was called back in the day, of all these ACC tournament games that were played there.
I remember that. I have been there. I've been in the media.
My favorite spot, if I can get it in there in time, if I get there early enough, is right in front of the ones from the Maryland NC State game in 1974, which is the greatest ACC basketball game ever played. And it's different. I love the bowels of the arena, the hallways, the theater. The photo room, which is different, is right next to the regular media room. The steps that you got to go down to get to the court and then go back up. There's not a bad seat in there. It was 16,000 expanded to 23,000 or whatever it was, and they just added it right on top, and you could sit on top of the action. I've covered a lot of stuff in there. My earliest memory, which was my second ACC tournament, maybe first or second, it was when Matt Harpring was a senior at Georgia Tech, and they were losing, and he fouled out. It was clear it was the end of his career, and the standing ovation he got, and that's missing now in the ACC in basketball. That people aren't as connected to players from other teams as they used to be. A lot of guys don't stick around. B, you don't see him that much. Back then, you were going to see Harpring in the Dean Dome. You were going to see him at Cole Fieldhouse. You were going to see him at University Hall, at Little John, and then you were going to go play him at his place. It's different now than it was back then. But that always stood out to me. And what the irony is, I believe it was Actually, I think it was in Charlotte when Kremens coached his final game. His last press conference was pretty wild. But the heartbreaking thing stood out to me because I had never been to an ACC tournament as a fan. First one I ever went to, I covered. And to experience that in those first couple of years, and that was in Greensboro, really gave me, it was almost like gave me a DNA injection, a deeper DNA injection of what this thing means. This thing,
bigger
at the time we called it the Church of ACC Basketball. So I love their building. I can't stand the name. I shan't call it that. I will never write that unless I get in trouble if I don't. But it's the Greensboro Coliseum to me, and it should always be. And I wish there was more stuff played there.
Yeah, I think they should too. It's a great Coliseum.
I've covered NCAA tournament there. I've covered regular season games there. I want to say it was maybe Coach K's 700th win I covered there. And Wes Miller was an assistant for Greensboro at the time. And my media seat was right behind the Greensboro bench. And Wes was wearing a Carolina blue tie, and they were playing Duke.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And I knew Wes when he was at Carolina. I had a beer with Wes in San Antonio at the Final Four that year in 2008. And a great conversation. And he turned around. I'm like, he's wearing the Carolina tie. He was so proud because Duke was in town. That was at the Greensboro Coliseum.
Yeah,
I had that night, because Kay was going to hit that number. The great Bucky Waters, who was once the head coach at Duke and longtime NBC analyst and just a wonderful, wonderful man. I talked with him for 45 minutes in the dining area off the press room about Coach K, because I was there to cover that, right, all those stories. I know Carolina fans don't want to hear Coach K, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give you the whole lifeblood of that building and my experiences there. That conversation happened there. That conversation. I had a great interview with Steve Kirshner in that building a long time ago, over by Radio Row at the ACC tournament. And I had a great interview with Woody Durham in that building. My first ACC tournament I ever covered. Sometimes former great players will get credentials to sit on press row. Well, who was to my left wearing a red hat? David Thompson. And I'm brand new in the business. I'm like, blah, blah, that kind of thing. I don't know. I can't say to him. I'm too terrified. It was the ACC tournament in Greensboro at the media hospitality room that I stood next to Ralph Sampson in the hospitality room. He had a beer in his hand, and it looked like a shot glass to the rest of us. I mean, Greensboro is an awesome place for that. There's so much history there. Unfortunately, in college sports, we don't care about history anymore. We don't care about tradition anymore. The fact that the Civil War in Oregon already occurred is absurd, but that's the way things are now. So I guess if the Pac-12, if UCLA and Washington are playing a football game with Big Ten logos on the field, I guess Greensboro Coliseum is going to get a name.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much cash went into it either. I know why they did it, but I think everybody in the state of North Carolina is going to call it the Greensboro Coliseum. At least I would be shocked if people say, "Hey, man, I'm going to watch a game at the First Horizon Coliseum" or whatever.
I have no idea what the name is.
I think it's First Horizon Bank.
I know that they changed the name again over in PNC is now Lenovo Center.
Yeah, it used to be RBC Center.
Yeah, I have a RBC Center computer right here. So maybe when this computer goes kaput, they'll give me a new one.
Maybe your
protesters. I'll protest over in front of the arena.
Maybe your Wi-Fi will be better.
They're doing some wild stuff over there too with what they're going to do. And
it's looking really cool.
That is the plan and the vision, I'd rather say, of what they want to do with the new basketball arena at Chapel Hill, South Franklin Street. They would love to bring in some outside money to help build like a smaller version of what they have at the Battery in Atlanta for the Braves ballpark, what they are envisioning with what's going to happen at PNC Arena, Lenovo, whatever it's called. That's what they would love to do with Chapel Hill with a new basketball arena. They would love to make that happen tomorrow and begin that process. So I think that's the way a lot of things are going now. It's going to allow teams to build stadiums, ballparks and stadiums and arenas outside of downtown again, where the land's cheaper, and you build up a little city feel around it. They went to cities 30 years ago. The Orioles changed that a lot when they moved downtown in Baltimore to the harbor. And that was it, because there was already stuff down there. So it just, rejuvenates the downtown. Now a lot of them are going to move out and build little small cities right around them.
Oh, yeah, I'm a big fan of that. And AJ, to tie it back to the first Horizon Coliseum, who knows? Maybe that redevelopment starts, maybe we see Carolina playing some basketball in the Greensboro Coliseum. Maybe, I don't know.
I don't think that would happen. I don't think that would happen. Somewhere. Yeah, I don't think that would happen because I believe that the Dean Dome is not going to be torn down and rebuilt. That's when it would.
Yeah, if they're not redeveloping it there, they don't.
Now they could build something in the parking lot, in the Bowls lot, right next to the Dean Dome, and then once that's complete, you tear down the Dean Dome and you make it parking.
Yeah,
that or like I said, if they build it South Franklin Street, then they won't need to affect that area around the Dean Dome at all.
That's a good point. Yeah, if you can just keep playing in the Dean Dome, so turn
the Dean Dome into an apartment complex. And all the apartments are on the upper deck, and you can look out and still see the old floor. Because
I know the conversation used to be like, probably going to redevelop it on that site, and then it's like, well, where are they going to play? They're not going to play in Carmichael.
My idea, by the way, I just said, I'm just throwing stuff out there, but there is in Indianapolis, the old ballpark where the minor league team plays. Instead of tearing it down, they turned it into apartments, and they still keep the field there, and you can look out and see a minor league baseball field.
That's cool. That's what a lot of it is now with, again, those redeveloping those stadiums and then having retail and also like multifamily apartment stuff. That seems to be kind of the new wave of everything, really, which I mean,
multifaceted stuff. What they would love to do at Carolina is just have some investors come in and build all that stuff. And then UNC would love to buy them out and control all of it.
And then control all of it.
Just go to Michael Jordan and say, hey, $1 billion.
Yeah, that's a couple mils, man.
Buy it, you own it, you make the money off it. I mean, quite frankly, he should be the Phil Knight of North Carolina athletics.
Maybe one day. By
the way, we have reached the longest football show ever, and we're now not even talking football. Julius Peppers is going to be honored this weekend, and he is organizing some stuff to raise NIL money for football, which is great because they don't have great participation with former football players in NIL.
Not at all, really.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff about the program that needs to be fixed in those kinds of areas. I was walking a concourse yesterday and damn near tripped because it's just like that. You need to fix it. Make it look like it matters.
Get up a little bit. Yeah,
there's some sprucing up that needs to be done. There's some NIL that needs to be done. But, Julius knows Michael. Julius just give him a call and say, dude, let's go.
Come on, man.
Let's get this going. You could be Phil Knight. You're better than Phil. He never hit a shot before. He wasn't Defensive Player of the Year. He didn't win rings. But you have. You're MJ. Michael Jordan changed that in a finger snap. And Julius is going to try to, because like I said, and I emphasize this, there hasn't been great participation in NIL with former Carolina football players.
Yeah, and that plays a factor.
It's kind of disappointing.
Yeah, they need all help they can get. I mean, good Lord, we talked about that ad nauseum, but especially in the NIL era now, man, you need as much cash as you can get to get things going. And it's not just players now, it's facilities and everything else that goes along with it. So
maybe Carolina should sell naming rights to the players since the Greensboro Coliseum went ahead and sold out. Can you imagine having like a corporate, what would be like Power Eccles' name would be, the tackle made by Power Eccles brought to you by Sheets.
That'd be fantastic.
And this touchdown made by J.J. Jones, who's brought to you by Leith Toyota.
The crazy thing is, it doesn't even sound that wild in today's movie. Like, you wouldn't surprise if that happened.
Do you remember the movie Any Given Sunday?
Yeah.
Okay, when that movie came out, I laughed. I refused to watch it. I said, this is the most ludicrous thing I've ever seen. No one will ever wear uniforms like that.
It's like freaking, alternate universe we're living in now. NIL it's not even real anymore. It's just I don't even know, a simulation.
Who would get Bojangles? This sack was brought to you by Travis Shaw and Bojangles.
Bo Atkinson, maybe? Bo Atkinson. Bojangles.
And he'd have like a little Bo-Berry biscuit patch on his jersey.
Hey, I don't think we're that far away from that. I seriously don't.
Well,
I really don't.
A lot of baseball teams are sponsored now.
Yeah, soccer's started doing it too. They started patches. Yeah.
The Orioles got one as soon as they put the patch on. They started playing 500 ball. I rip the patch off. Which, by the way, they lost yesterday, 1-0. TV screwed me up, and I couldn't. I had player interviews. I recorded the game, and then
it ruined your mood, didn't it? Yeah, well, they got to win now. They got to win 2 in a row to advance, and they play today a little bit later, I guess. So I'll have to watch. Hey, man. I'll be rooting for him. I see them. Make sure you put your Orioles cap on. You need a good by the way, remind me to tell Dina I'm off the grid at 30. Okay. I'll let her know. I'm sure you won't forget. Make sure you tell her, because if not,
Andrew, there's a football offer. What you want me to do with it?
yeah. When Carolina gets
my internet's not good right now.
Yeah, when Carolina gets 17 commitments at 5:30.
Andrew, they got 9 commitments in the last 9 minutes.
When every news article breaks that could ever break at Carolina at 5:30.
Andrew, McNamara is going to retire. I know it's the 4th inning, but you got to help us out.
Like clockwork, man. Something will happen tonight. You know that, right?
Well, I'm not flying, so nothing's that. Yeah. If I was flying somewhere, all hell would break loose. And when
AJ will be mid game and get 17 commitments from every player.
It'll be bases loaded, bottom of the 6th, 2-1 game. Cedric Mullins up at bat, and then all of a sudden Dean is going to call. I hate to bother you, but they got a commitment.
Yeah, Carolina announces the Bojangles Keenan Stadium or something like that. Yeah, it'll come out at 5:30 tonight. Hey, man, blame it on AJ when it happens, because it will happen, because he is trying to watch a baseball game and be a human being for 15 minutes. So, yeah, man, let's get off here. You got work to do if you're going to take off at 4:30 tonight, man.
We're almost at an hour and 40 minutes. If anybody has stuck around this long,
give him something, AJ. Give him something.
Send us a DM and tell us what the score of the Orioles game was yesterday, and one of you will win a 1-year subscription to THI. Somebody.
I love it. It's fantastic.
And as a bonus, not just the score, but tell me what position Cedric Mullins plays.
Ooh, you heard it here, folks. If you're here still listening, all 4 of you, get it in. You can get a little free subscription at TarIllustrated.com. You know how to do it, at Heel Illustrate, or you can just shoot us.
Or listening, and one of them's looking at Twitter and not paying attention.
Yeah, it just went right.
And he's like, "Oh, they're over now."
White noise at this point. AJ, let's get out of here. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Another edition of the UNC Football Show. Make sure you keep it locked to TarIllustrated.com for all your coverage. Carolina football, basketball, and recruiting. You can sign up for just $8.33 a month. Links in the description below. If you don't want to sign up, you can support the channel and everything we do by shooting us a Venmo at Tar Heel Illustrated. That link's in the description below. We'd rather you sign up, because you get a lot more perks for doing it. But if you want to do it like that, we appreciate that as well. And it all goes back into running this thing and paying for travel and all the good stuff that comes with covering the Tar Heels 365 days a year. So make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell too. And yeah, guys, we'll see y'all next time. Thanks.